Hey there. Welcome to the pilot episode to something I've always wanted to do. This video serves as a proof of concept of sorts for Collision Course, this new series. Collision Course is a series inspired by shows like Fictional Fisticuffs and Versus the Universe. It's a versus show similar to like a radio drama where I narrate the fight as I narrate the fight as it goes on, but I'm gonna do my own spin on things, which you'll see very soon. Just want to let you know before we begin, this series will be non-verdict based. What does that mean? Well, the show isn't focused on finding out who would win in a fight, but it's definitely researched, since I had to do research on how exactly these characters would interact. And for the pilot episode, we have Knuckles the Echidna from the Sonic series, going up against Cash Banuka from Crash Bandicoot. Y'all know who Crash and Knuckles are, they're the funny meme characters. So yeah, that's basically the gist. I hope you all enjoy what I have to offer. We opened to a lush island in the middle of the ocean. At the very center of the island was a large patch of land void of plant life or rocky terrain. Suddenly, a dimensional rift opened out of thin air, and stepped out Crash Bandicoot and Aku Aku. The mask let out a sigh of relief, before saying,
"Finally, we made it out. Now then, I sense another quantum rift nearby. We should get going."
Crash surveyed his surroundings, until his eyes spotted a lone emerald shard just laying on the ground.
Good eye, Crash. Grab that crystal and we can get going.
As the Bandicoot ran up to the emerald, Knuckles the Echidna walked into the clearing. He saw that the Master Emerald Shard was picked up by a stranger before turning away. The Echidna panicked and dashed to the stranger, unleashing a quick jab to the back of his head that flung Crash into the ground. Aku Aku panicked and checked up on his companion.
Crash! Are you alright?
The marsupial comically shook his head while spitting out a large wad of sand. Once he recovered, Crash and Aku Aku furiously glared at the crimson stranger.
"Sorry for bursting your bubbles, but this emerald's coming with me."
Whose response made the Bandicoot angrier.
"So, you wanna fight for it, eh? Fine by me!"
Knuckles tossed the Emerald Shard aside as he cracked his fist and put up his dukes. Crash and Aku Aku nodded at each other before the Bandicoot made a mad dash to his opponent. When he made it half the distance, Crash jumped into the air, performing a jumping kick, which was immediately caught by Knuckles. Unknowingly, Knuckles played into Crash's paws. The mutated animal planted his free foot on the ground where he spun rapidly in place. Knuckles was twirled around until he released his grip on the Bandicoot's leg, causing him to collide into a tree. With his plan a success, Crash celebrated with a small victory dance. This further angered the Echidna, prompting him to grab hold of the palm tree he smashed into and uprooted the thing out from the ground. Once Crash noticed, he panicked and ducked out of the way as the makeshift projectile grazed past his head. The moment Crash stood back up, Knuckles rushed in and smashed his fist against Crash's face, setting the marsupial hurling across the entire island. He attempted to recover, but in his daze, he could barely make out a crimson object heading right for him. The marsupial equipped a jetpack from out of nowhere and propelled himself out of the way. Knuckles wasn't about to let his new rival get away, so he rapidly climbed the mountainside to catch up. The mutant animal began to panic, so from the confines of Hammerspace, Crash armed himself with a bazooka and fired Wumpa Fruit at the red mammal. Knuckles failed to notice and was continuously pelted by Wumpa Fruit.
Ow. Ow. Ow! That's it. The gloves are coming on!
And with that, Knuckles equipped the shovel gloves and used them to dig into the mountain. Crash hovered in the air for a bit, waiting for his opponent to resurface, but what he wasn't expecting was Knuckles digging his way up a higher vantage to get their drop on Crash. Crash flew, barely avoiding the Echidna's swipe. However, Knuckles quickly grabbed hold of the mutant's leg and held on for dear life. Crash jerked the Guardian uncontrollably through the air until Knuckles eventually let go. As Knuckles was falling, Crash caught the Echidna and pile-drived him into the ground. Before he could celebrate, Crash spotted another dimensional rift several meters in front of him. The marsupial was about to check up on it until he heard a strange sound behind him. The treasure hunter spin-dashed into Crash, unintentionally sending both himself and his opponent through the dimensional rift. When they exited, Knuckles looked around, puzzled. Instead of the tropical islands, he found himself in a futuristic, high-in-the-clouds city, adorned with bright lights and flying food trucks. Crash managed to use the confusion to slip away from the Echidna and made a run for it. By the time Knuckles noticed, Crash was long gone and made a mad dash to keep up with the mutant.
"Hey! Get back here!"
Crash and Knuckles raced across the tops of flying vehicles, occasionally running along the side of food trucks and bashing through rows of crates. All the while, Knuckles closed the distance with his speed, making the Bandicoot begin to panic. Suddenly, the quantum mask of space, Lonnie Loli, appeared through a portal a meter ahead of the two. Crash cocked a wide grin as he grabbed the mask out of thin air and deviously smiled, much to the chagrin of Lonnie Lolly.
What? No way! You're not involving me in this!
Crash placed Lonnie Lolly on his back, gaining a cyan suit with pink highlights.
Okay, I guess you are.
As the Echidna leaped off one final truck, a pink vertical sign phased into existence in front of the Guardian as he collided headfirst into the object. The knucklehead weaved through the incoming objects as best he could, but try as he might, he began losing momentum, which caused him to be in the path of another neon sign. Nonplussed, Knuckles took to gliding through the air instead of chasing on foot. The knucklehead weaved between the incoming objects as best he could, but try as he might, he began losing momentum, which caused him to be in the path of another neon sign. Crash and Lonnie Lolly celebrated, but the Cyan's masked excited laughter changed into fear once Knuckles punched the neon sign, launching it in the direction of the duo.
Crash, you probably want to—
But before he could finish, the neon sign collided with the Bandicoot, causing him to fall into the city. Knuckles glided atop Crash and repeatedly hammered his fist into the Bandicoot's face as they plummeted. As they fell, both failed to notice a quantum rift below them, and exited into a checkered planetoid with various blue spheres scattered about. Crash and Knuckles' fight spanned multiple dimensions, constantly entering and exiting out of quantum rifts, seemingly to no end. Until finally, we cut to an unknown barren planet where Crash is launched out of a rift, stumbling into the dirt before colliding with a large boulder. As the mutant recovered, his eyes widened from the sight of the red Echidna holding up a giant boulder over his shoulder. Knuckles gave the Bandicoot no time to react, as he slammed the rock atop him. The Echidna scoffed as he dusted his hands before walking away, wondering how exactly he's gonna get back home, but stopped in his tracks when he heard rumblings behind him. The Guardian turned around to see the Bandicoot casually tossed aside the giant boulder and was now wearing Aku Aku as a mask. Knuckles let out an enraged groan as he delivered a right hook across the Bandicoot's cheek. But to Knuckles' shock, the Bandicoot was unfazed.
What?
Crash and Aku Aku beamed a shit-eating grin at the Echidna, which only made him angrier. Knuckles pummeled the Bandicoot at high speeds, creating after images with his fists that Crash and Aku Aku barely react at all. As Knuckles' pace began to slow down, Crash reeled back his head as he smashed Aku Aku dead center of Knuckles' skull. Crash followed up with a string of punches and kicks all over his opponent's body, finishing it off with a straight punch to the gut that sent Knuckles hurling backward. Knuckles planted his fist into the ground, stopping himself from skidding any further. Knuckles growled, his anger rising as he started to wind up his right arm.
Time for a Knuckles sandwich.
Knuckles ran as fast as he could, leaving behind a large trail of dust behind him. Crash and Aku Aku readied themselves before charging forward, and as the two glared into each other's eyes, Knuckles and Crash prepared themselves for what will surely be the final exchange. As Crash readied an attack of his own, Knuckles threw his wound-up punch directly into the Bandicoot's face. With a single punch, Knuckles ignited an explosion in the air, catapulting Aku Aku off of Crash's face. Additionally, Crash was blasted away from the same attack. Dazed beyond belief, Crash struggled to prop himself back on his feet. Knuckles wasted no time to run toward the Bandicoot and ran circles around him. Crash took notice of the Echidna before he could question what was going on. The ground beneath the orange mutant began rumbling. Before he could question what was going on, the ground beneath him began rumbling. Before he could question what was going on, the ground beneath him began rumbling. His eyes widened before saying out loud,
Oh no.
The ground collapsed beneath Crash, making him fall down to the depths of the planet. Knuckles stared down the hole, then an explosion bursted out of the pit, catching him by surprise.
Crash! No!
Yelled out Aku Aku as he floated down the hole. Knuckles dusted off his gloves and let out a relieved sigh. Finally, it was all over, and the Guardian could finally relax. The only problem is...
Now, how am I getting out of here?
By sheer coincidence, another quantum rift opened up several feet in front of him. Knuckles peered into the portal to see the island where this whole event started.
That's what I'm talking about.
The Echidna chuckled to himself as he hopped through the portal without a second thought. Knuckles took in his surroundings. He definitely was back in his home dimension, but all the excitement from the previous battle made him lose track of why he was even on the island in the first place.
Now, what was I doing again?
Knuckles walked into an open clearing and saw the shard of the Master Emerald being picked up by a stranger before turning away. The Echidna panicked and dashed to the stranger, unleashing a quick jab to the back of his head that flung Crash into the ground. As Knuckles was about to throw his final punch, Crash performed a slide, avoiding the attack while tripping up the Echidna in the process. In the midst of Knuckles' helplessness, Crash unleashed a roundhouse kick, launching him into the side of a mountain. Crash spotted a conveniently placed TNT crate in front of him, and immediately picked up the crate before chucking it forward. Knuckles, still recovering, saw the impromptu projectile coming right at him, and panicked. The Echidna uppercutted the crate like a volleyball. At the apex of its height, the crate blew up, forming a gigantic explosion that created a landslide atop the mountain. Large boulders fell down the mountainside. Knuckles stood in awe, only able to utter one last thing.
Whoa.
And within seconds, Knuckles was entombed by the landslide.
Ow.
Once his foe was finally defeated, Aku Aku hopped off Crash's face as the team proceeded to do his iconic victory dance.
Great work, Crash! Now, we can finally move on.
To the surprise of both, a quantum rift opened up behind both of them.
Another rift. Come on, Crash. Let's go.
Crash gave a hearty thumbs up as he and Aku Aku entered the portal without a thought. The mask let out a sigh of relief before saying,
Finally, we made it out. Now then, I sense another quantum rift nearby. We should get going.
Crash surveyed his surroundings until his eyes spotted a lone emerald shard just laying on the ground. Yep, that definitely was a fight. But why did things play out the way things did? Well, let me explain. First of all, as mentioned in the opening, stats were not taken into consideration while writing this fight, but that doesn't mean the two weren't portrayed as equals. Speed and power are staples of Knuckles' character and something Crash isn't really known for, so for the fight, Knuckles was written with being physically superior in mind. Though, to make up for it, Crash's arsenal just has way more variety to it than what Knuckles usually carries around, so Crash can realistically keep Knuckles on his toes, and Crash being the more cartoony of the fighters allows him to basically shrug off any attacks Knuckles throws at him. I mean, he's done so in the past, so why not here? And the last thing of note people might be wondering about, what's up with the multiple endings? The point of this show is to accurately portray characters as best I can, and to give my take on how they would interact. And that would include what would happen if one of these characters came out on top. If the fight ends with only one of them winning, well, that just leaves the other character in the dust. And at the end of the day, that's the point of the show. Accurately portraying how characters should fight, while also creating an enjoyable experience. If I do end up doing my job right, which is up to you folks. There's a Google form in the description where you can give feedback on this episode. Tell me how you feel about this pilot and what you think I should improve with. All feedback helps with making this series as best as I can. That is, if y'all really want to see more. And before this video wraps up, I want to give a very big thank you to the people who helped me along this wild ride. Special thank you to Jay Riss for voicing the best Sonic character. Thanks to my friend Scizor for voicing both Crash and Aku Aku. And thanks to Adam for voicing Lonnie Loli. And thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. I hope you have a good one.